What happens when the government tries to fix one housing problem but ends up creating another one? Because right now in British Columbia, there is a growing pressure to stop landlords from banning pets in rentals. And on the surface, that sounds fair. It sounds compassionate. It sounds like the right thing to do. But here's the real question. If the province forces more landlords to accept pets, does that create more housing security? Or does it push more small landlords out of the rental market? And if that happens, who actually loses? Not the big corporations, not these politicians, but it is the everyday renter who is looking to rent a property with his companion and fur baby, looking for a condo, a townhouse, a basement suite, or a detached home to rent. Hey everyone, Roshan Victor here. I'm a local realtor serving the Fraser Valley and the Greater Vancouver area. And in this channel, we break down housing stories, market trends, and policy changes that affect buyers, sellers, investors, and renters. Basically, you and me, right here in British Columbia. So if you want practical real estate insights without all the noise, make sure to subscribe. Now, let's get into this one. Because this topic is a lot more complicated than what people think. First, let me be very clear. I'm a pet parent, so and a realtor. So whatever I'm putting across is my opinion and it keeps both sides of the equation into perspective. I may offend you animal lovers and pet parents, and I apologize in advance, but I'm just putting a perspective from my side. As of today, landlords in British Columbia can still decide whether pets are allowed in their rentals. They are they can also place restrictions on size, the number of pets, and if pets are allowed, the landlord can ask for pet damage deposit. So right now there is no province-wide ban on no pet clause. But the pressure to change that is growing. Groups like BCSPCA and First United have renewed calls for the province to stop pet restrictions in rental buildings with 5 or more units. Their argument is simple. For many people, pets are family, and nobody should have to choose between keeping their home and keeping their family member a pet. Now, honestly, that is a very real argument, and I think a lot of people will relate to that. But here is where the conversation gets tricky. Not every landlord in BC is some big investor with a giant rental portfolio. A lot of landlords in Surrey, Langley, Cloverdale, Abbotsford, and across the Fraser Valley are just regular people like you and me. They own a condo building or a basement suite or a townhome. Sometimes it is an investment, sometimes it's part of their retirement plan. Sometimes they bought the property so that their kids can move in later. And for that kind of a landlord, risk matters a lot. If you own a 100 unit building, one bad tendency is frustrating. If you own one rental property, one bad tendency can wipe out years of positive cash flow. That is the part that does not get talked about enough. Now, let me be clear. This is not about being anti pet. But before we get into the next part of what I want to say, I want to share a couple of stories which have happened when I went with my buyers to see a property which is tenanted with pets. In Willoughby, 2 bedroom condo, it was a rented property with 2 cats. We entered the property. The entire soft furniture, the floors were scratched. The upholstery was falling apart. And to make it worse, the tenants had not even cleaned the litter box. Firstly, for I felt really bad for the sellers because they were trying to get out of a situation, probably selling the investment property. However, because of the tenant who did not care about their own pets, they had almost trashed the place. Just to be clear, in British Columbia, the pet deposit is half a month rent. And if you want to rent a property, you have to pay another half a month rent as deposit, security deposit. So a total of 1 month rent. Now let's hypothesize that my client would have liked this property and we would have purchased it. For the seller to fix that entire problem, the flooring, a fresh paint, the cabinetry which was scratched up. In my estimation, that was a $7,500 to $8,000 fix, whereas what the deposit would be around 3,000. So that seller would be out of pocket $4,000 just to get it fixed to sell his property. And this is a very real problem. Absolutely do not have a problem when we go and see properties where somebody is looking at upgrading and has a pet, because they are really taking care of their pet and their house at the same time. So it is extremely important that mom and pop investors just like you and me needs a little more security than just what is being currently provided, and we'll talk about that. Many pets cause no issue at all, but not every situation is the same. Some pets are quiet, well behaved, no problem. Others can damage. There can be noise complaints, flooring issue, odor, scratch, chewed trims. And in a strata property, sometimes it's even more complicated because the landlord can get hit with complaints or fines. So the real issue here is not whether pets are good or bad. The issue is whether the government should enforce all landlords to take on that risk without giving them better protection. And that to me is where the concern is. Because if governments want more pet friendly housing, that's fine. Let's have that conversation. But then we also need to talk about faster dispute resolution, better enforcement, better protection for landlords when there is a major damage, and better rules around repeat problem tenancies. None of this exists currently in BC because right now a lot of small landlords already feel like the system is stacked against them. And when people feel that way, they do one of three things. Number one, they stop renting out the unit. Second, they become much more selective on who they are going to rent out to. Or third, which is the worst one, and when this happens, the market does not get better. They sell their property. It gets tighter, especially for the kind of rentals that families actually want. A good condo, a townhouse with a garage, a basement suite in a nice neighborhood, a detached home with a yard. A lot of that supply comes from small landlords and not giant institutions. And this is where the nuance matters because a big rental building with 80 units is not the same thing as a family renting out their one and only investment condo. Those both do not have the same risk profile. Those are not the same ownership structure and they should not be always treated the same way. If the government wants to start with large multi-unit buildings, I understand that logic. A large building can spread the risk across many units. A small landlord cannot. And that is why I think one size fits all approach would be a mistake. The other thing here is timing. The rental market today is not exactly the same as it was a year to 2 years ago. Some segments have softened, some vacancy rates have improved, but the market is still uneven, and that matters because policy decisions are made too late or too broadly. And this can create consequences that were never intended. So, yes, more pet friendly housing sounds great in theory, but if the result is that fewer owners want to rent out their properties, period, then the renters would end up with fewer choices overall. And that is the part people need to think about. So, here is my take BC absolutely needs more pet friendly housing. The demand is real. But I do not think the answer is to keep adding blanket rules without also protecting the people who supply a huge part of that rental market. To me, the smarter solution is balanced. More flexibility in large rental buildings, more protection for responsible pet owning tenants, and more stronger safeguards for smaller landlords who are taking on real risks. Because if we get this wrong, we do not solve the housing problem, we just created a new one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Should BC ban no pet clauses in larger rental buildings? Should small landlords be treated differently? And where do you think the balance should be? If you found this video helpful, subscribe to this channel. And if you're thinking about buying, selling, or investing in the Fraser Valley or Greater Vancouver, reach out to me anytime with the link in my description to book a time with me. See you in the next video.